Richie, we know Florida State's going to be really, really good this year. And even losing the talent they did last year, there's thoughts around, oh, well, they're still ranked high, but is that just because they had a good year last year and you just kind of give them their flowers for having a good year? I don't necessarily think that's the case. I don't think that's why they're in everybody's way too early top 25 rankings. I don't think that's why they're hovering around the top 10 when it comes to everyone's projections for next year. A lot of people think the Seminoles are still going to be very good, but polls are pretty meaningless. And we've talked about S&P Plus not necessarily being the end-all, be-all for advanced analytics or advanced metrics or anything like that. But Florida State ranked really high again in S&P Plus, which was released late last week. The Noles come in at 12th. We'll talk about where some of their opponents are, but first I want to get your take. Are you surprised by that at all, that Florida State could put 10 guys in the draft, have a couple more guys sign as undrafted free agents, and still be that close to the top of college football?
No, and I think that's where you want to be with Mike Norvell entering his, I believe, 5th season at this point. It's crazy he's been here that long. But yeah, he's built a program, and people laughed at him for using the transfer portal so much early on, and now everybody understands you have to use the portal. Like Clemson, we'll talk about them in a second, but them not taking a single transfer is crazy to me. But he's found out early, I don't have the players to compete right now. I need to hit the portal. And he did. And he did it in a way that nobody really else has done other than maybe Lane Kiffin, who's also, I think he's top 5 or top 8, at least in the SP Plus, which we're going to talk about. But yeah, I think that is where Florida State is right now. And we're going to lose a lot of talented players next season. And I fully expect us to be in the top 10 to 15 entering the 2025 season. That's just where this program is right now. And as long as Mike is here, and thank goodness he turned down Alabama, I think we're in a good spot moving forward, TJ.
I appreciate you for that comment so that we can get the angry Alabama fans in the mentions down below. So if you have negative comments, please make sure you direct them at Richie's YouTube, not the channel's YouTube. No, I'm just kidding. We'll take all the hate. No, I agree. As much as there's different takes on, oh, Mike's recruiting, or is it good enough, or is this elite enough? Where can we be? Like, the one thing will say about Mike Norvell is I think he's always going to recruit, like worst case around like 10th to 12th to 15th. Like, he's going to recruit in the top 10% of college football. Is he going to recruit like Georgia? Probably not. But to be fair, nobody else is recruiting like Georgia either. He's always going to recruit around that top 10. You're going to have some years that are slightly better, some years that are slightly worse. He's always going to have like a top 5 portal class, and those are like ready-made guys that are ready to play for you immediately. And then he's always going to develop guys better. When I sat down with him in Tampa just last week, a week ago today, he said we lean a little heavier development. Like we lean a little closer on the development side, and we're going to be more development focused. And he mentioned taking guys from other places, Trey Benson under Mario, who did nothing, and then turning them into RB2 in the NFL draft. And so, yeah, I think that's always, and if you do those 3 things, if you recruit about top 10, if you have a top 5 portal class of ready-made guys, and you develop just as well as anybody else in the country, if not better, you're going to have a playoff roster just about every year, right? I'm not going to say that, you have to make the playoffs every single year or you got to get out, but I do think you're probably competing for the playoffs, I don't know, 3 out of every 5 years. Like, if you made the playoffs, you're eventually going to want to win, right? Like, the standard is excellence. It is to win a championship. But if you're making the playoffs 60% of the time, 3 out of every 5 years, and you're getting left out like those other years at like 9-3 or have an occasional 8-4 season, but then the other 3 years you're going playoffs and then 9-3, like, I'd take that 5-year span, because no one else in the country there are some teams in the country, Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, I get it. But most teams are not doing that with that consistency. And I think that's where Mike Norvell is going to keep Florida State pretty consistently at this point. So, Richie, other teams ahead of Florida State in S&P Plus, well, there's just one, Notre Dame at 10th. Does it surprise you that nobody else is ahead of FSU?
I love Bill Conley, he does a great job in my opinion with the SP plus. I think he tries to take all bias out of it, and it just sticks strictly to the metrics, and I think that's a big deal. I'm a little surprised Notre Dame's ahead of Florida State, to be honest. I thought Clemson might have been, even Miami, which they're not either. But yeah, that Notre Dame game, I think that's a huge game. Notre Dame at 10th in the SP plus. I'm really excited to see that game. I don't want to commit to going to that game, but I would love to go back to Chicago and take the bus over to South Bend, because that was such a fun time, even though we got blown out back when Willie was the head coach. But yeah, man, Notre Dame being 10th is a little surprising to me. I'm never a huge believer in Notre Dame. I just, for whatever reason, when they played Alabama in the national title game with Everett Golson as a quarterback, I just I don't think I bet on that game, but if I did, I would have bet heavy on Alabama. And it wasn't competitive. Not at all. Yeah. So Notre Dame being so high is a little tricky to me, because on the road in November at supposedly our toughest team by the SP plus, I don't think that's our toughest game. I think Miami's our toughest game. So we'll see.
Yeah, Notre Dame's interesting. I talked with Joe DeLeon of the Ruffino and Joe show on the national channel, College Football Addiction. If you're not subscribed there, go check it out. But I talked with him about Notre Dame, and I asked specifically about Riley Leonard and his health. And Riley's missed some time here in spring, and I'd expect him to be back and pretty close to 100% by fall, right? Like that's the hope is that he is back. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you in May 26th that like, oh man, I hope he's not 100% when we play Notre Dame so that we get an easy win. Like I don't really care that much to cheer. And also like, if that's what you're hoping for in May for a November game, like whatever, man. Like
what are we doing?
So I'm not at all hope, but like if he's not ready, like if he's not, like it all rides on him. And I think the expectation of Notre Dame is that he's going to be a little bit better than I think he's going to be. Riley Leonard was not bad at all, but like I think the thought is that he's going to be like this program changer, not program changer, because obviously Notre Dame's a great program, but like this just game changer that just does miraculous, like Teddy Bridgewater at Louisville, right? Like I think that's what the thought almost is that he's going to be. And I don't know. I don't see it. Was he banged up against us? Yes. Did him going out make a difference? Yes. I mean, I do think it did. Now, I think Florida State wins that game either way. I don't think Riley Leonard was doing anything spectacular that we couldn't have handled. If he's 100% healthy, is that game a little bit different? Maybe. We were struggling as it started. Anyway, most of that was because of what we were making mistakes doing, throwing a pick six and other things. But I don't know. Notre Dame, again, we talked about this last week, Richie. They don't worry me a ton. I will say, I think S&P Plus has the top three games, pretty well locked in. Clemson at 14th, Miami at 19th. Home and away, how does that factor in? It doesn't to S&P Plus, but like how does that factor into like how difficult something is? But your top three games, you could put them in any order, right? You've got Miami there. I probably still have Clemson at the top of this, and then I don't know, at Notre Dame, at Miami. I feel like the rivalries may be slightly more challenging, but if Notre Dame is firing on all cylinders, I think we'll have a better idea when we get to November of which one of those two is going to be tougher. They may both be incredibly tough. I guess Miami's in late October, but have the top three all within the top 20. Miami 19th, Clemson 14th, and Notre Dame 10th. And then you start to get to some of the other teams. I have long said that this schedule had 8 games you needed to win on it, and then 4 games that you at worst need to go 2-2 in. Have I been saying the fourth team incorrectly the whole time? Because this has SMU at 23rd and Florida at 33rd. Now, I know that's only, 10% difference when there's 130 teams. It might be like 12% different, or a little bit less, 8% difference when there's 130 teams. But I've been thinking that Florida was going to be our fourth toughest game. Conley says at SMU might be a little bit tougher. I will get right back to chatting with Richie, but first, I want to give some love to my friends over at gotspears.com. You can use the code Father's Day 24. Now, I know it's Memorial Day, but you can use Father's Day 24 in the checkout, and it'll take $50 off of several products on their website. the 6-foot spear with or without the torch, the large gator head with the tomahawk, the 6-foot white tip spear, the 6-foot spear with 14 business day rush shipping for Father's Day. You want the medium gator head with the tomahawk and put rush on that, you can certainly do it. You can also get 2 6-foot spears for $200 if you need them for decoration or whatever. It's a savings of over $100 right now on the gotspears.com website. My guy John will get you taken care of. As you can see, everybody at FSU has one of these. Make sure that you go and get yours for your father or somebody special for you today.
Yeah, and I think I said on the show, TJ, that SMU is the one game that kind of sticks out to me in Dallas. I think that's going to be a really tough game. I think they had the 4th or 5th best odds to win the ACC, and what the odds that just came out this week. Yeah, I think SMU is going to be a very difficult game, and I'm not surprised to see them in the top 25, and I would not be surprised to see them in the top 25 when we travel to Dallas to play them in September. I do think that's going to be a very tough game. Florida doesn't scare me. I truly think by the time we play Florida, I don't know if Billy Napier will still have a job at the time. We'll see. It'll be interesting, but their schedule is brutal, and especially the back half. They better stack some wins early on, because in the back end, when they play Georgia, LSU, Florida State, whoever else, I mean, my goodness, it is ridiculous. But yeah, I do think SMU is the trickiest game on the schedule, not the toughest, but one that we definitely need to bring our A game for, because that's a game you could lose, and it's not a game you can afford to lose.
Yeah, I like the way the schedule sets up for us before we play SMU. I like, what is it? Memphis, Georgia Tech, BC before that. It's Cal before it too. But I like playing, worse teams to kind of get up and rolling, right? Like teams you should pretty definitively be better than. The one thing about S&P that I don't know how well it factors in, and I am speaking from complete ignorance. So if somebody's kind of an S&P or an advanced analytics person, like feel free to jump in and correct me here. But what I do wonder is how well it measures trench play, because like Memphis is 39th and SMU is 23rd. But like, do their offense and defensive lines, like, can they really, like, because to me, as tricky of a game as SMU could be, like if Florida State can dominate up front in the trenches, they should be able to get away with that, right? Memphis is a good team too, but if Florida State can dominate up front, so I don't know how well S&P Plus factors that in, or maybe they do a phenomenal job of it. I really just have no idea, right? But that is something that maybe sticks out to me or makes me think like, okay, well, where does Florida State have an advantage? Well, they should have an advantage over both those teams in a lot of places, but nowhere more than where they've done a good job of developing and recruiting on the offense and defensive lines. And if they can kind of bully teams that they're expected to bully, they should be okay. I agree though on Florida. Like I will say this. I think Florida will be a better team this year than they were last year. And I think that Graham Mertz was obviously better than everyone expected. And I think he's an average to above average quarterback. Now, I think a lot of his stuff is just very easy completions, just very dump off friendly. Did you see the tweet this week where the Florida fan was like, they say all Eugene Wilson does is catch bubble passes. And then he put like a 9-minute highlight and like 7 minutes of the highlights were just bubble screens and handoffs and like reverses and stuff. There were like 3 passes downfield. And I was just like, I don't know that you quite proved what you were trying to prove here. But Florida at the end of the day just doesn't worry me. I think defensively they're still a nightmare. They're still a mess. I think their offense and defensive lines are going to be terrible.
I think they'll quit by the time we play them.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't quit, especially if they fire Napier and like they're playing for like the interim coach or whatever. Like you always see teams kind of get up for that. Not that they think that would be the guy that leads them going forward, but it wouldn't surprise me if they don't actually quit, because I feel like even when teams have quit before, like they get up for the rivalry game. I think about when Mullen got fired and they nearly lost to like Sanford or something the week before they played us, and then they ended up they like Sanford hung 50 on them.
The best onside kick attempt I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, Sanford almost beat them, and then they still beat us. Like they still like I think even if they have quit, like they'll still get up for the rivalry game. But they just don't worry me at all. Like
especially in Tallahassee.
If Florida State, I'll say this, if I think 9-3 is a little is probably below expectations, right? You should win
Yeah.
10 games this year. Your Vegas over under is 9.5 everywhere. But if you don't win at least 9, I think there's a question of like, okay, well, what happened, right? Did somebody major get hurt? Did you have like 3 fluke things go off at once? Like what happened where you couldn't get to 9 wins? Like some of these other teams, again, Memphis at 39th, Duke at 47th, the rest of these teams 50 or below, UNC 50, Cal 52, Georgia Tech 63, Boston College 75. To me, those are inexcusable losses.
Yeah.
Like if you were to somehow drop, if you were to drop a game to SMU or Florida, but then you beat like Miami and Notre Dame, you lose to Clemson, and you go 10-2 that way, like losing a game you're not supposed to lose is, I don't want to say it's okay, but like that makes sense.
Happens every year. Yeah, happens every year to 99% of schools in the country.
Most teams drop a game
it
they're
just
not
happens.
supposed to,
yeah.
Right? But then you go out and win a game you're either not supposed to or a 50-50 game. Like if you lose to Notre Dame, but you beat Clemson and Miami and you lose at SMU, well, then you're still going to Charlotte with a chance to go to the playoff, And so I don't know. There's a lot of polls out there, like way too early rankings, way too early preseason polls, way too early. Here's who I think is going to be good. Here's not. This is really the first like metric we've gotten that says, no, Florida State should still be a really good team. As far as the ACC goes, they're the best in the ACC. They should go out and win the ACC this year. Now it's close. Like Clemson's 14th, Florida State at 12th. This isn't like some huge gap. But at the end of the day, Florida State's got a little more talent than anybody right now. They're a little bit better of a team than anybody else in the ACC. We'll see how things are adjusted. But as of right now, you should win 10 or 11 games based on this coming out this week.
Yeah, I think, TJ, it's Charlotte or bust, right? If you do not get to Charlotte, I think that the season is a failure. And that's a great place to be because that's not where we have been the past, 5, 6, 7 years or so. Just thinking of the thought that if we do not get to Charlotte, this season was a bust. That's a great place to be. Miami's been in this league for 20 years now and been to Charlotte once and kicked a field goal from their own 3-yard line. Like that's where we are. And we're now to a point where Florida State, I truly believe it's Charlotte or bust. And I love that I have family in Charlotte and it gives me a reason to take an early Christmas up there and see my nieces. And I just love it. And I do think, you can drop a game. I don't think we'll see a year like last year with a team like Louisville, who just had one conference loss, who made to the conference championship game. It's probably going to be mostly 2-loss teams. And I think it comes down to Florida State, Clemson, and Miami. That's what I see it coming down to. But I do expect Florida State to be in Charlotte.
Yeah, no, I agree. The only caveat I would have to it being a bust if you didn't make it is if you lose to Clemson, win the rest of your games, and somebody else goes undefeated. That
yeah,
have Clemson.
No, that's
like if
fair,
you go 11-1,
yeah,
really specific scenario.
You're probably in the playoffs still if that's
yeah. At that point, who cares, right? You just get a bye week that week. Who cares about winning another ACC? And what might be our final one. Hey, I did a video this week on Mike Norvell's opening press conference. And everything he said in that press conference that has now come to pass 4.5 years ago, if you missed that, click the video on the screen right now to check it out.